All right, we should be live now. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the yet another episode of Death Impressions. My name is Chris. I'm a host of this lovely small podcast or like talk show, whatever you want to call it. And today I'm joined by Paul Blasucci. Paul is great F-sharp
Oh,
developer, or I should
oh.
say .NET developer. He's my great friend. He's also mostly well known as a husband of Rachel Reese. So
Yes, indeed.
so hello, Paul, and thanks a lot for joining me today.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me. This is great. I'm stoked to be here. I haven't honestly all the things I've done in the community and open source and tech and whatever. This is my first time doing like a podcast talk show kind of Twitch thing. So this is awesome. It's very cool.
Cool. Okay, so let's actually start with something different. So I know that you're living in Netherlands nowadays. So
Oh
are
yeah.
you already used to, or are you already a fan of football, or are you still into those like silly American sports?
So I was never a big sports guy to begin with. I've learned to enjoy football quite a bit more since moving here. You know, for 4 years is enough time to sort of get into football. The problem is, since I'm not really a sports guy, I'll still at work occasionally make like baseball sports analogies, and my coworkers will all just look at me like, "What?" Or like I'll
Yeah,
make I'll make an American football sports analogy, and they'll be like, "That's odd."
yeah, about fumbling the ball or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like I do, like fumbled on the 1 yard line all the time. They're like, a yard line? What? What's that?
Yeah.
Like, oh, right. I said, yeah. So, but no, I also, I don't know if you've seen, but for the Euro 2021 thing, they've got all the streets in the Netherlands are all just like covered in head to toe orange, and lots of they don't get this excited and like patriotic about things for like Koning for like the King's Day and for like the big holidays. So this is like
No, the
this is a
football
huge
is
thing.
the
The huge
football is
football's massive.
important. Yeah,
Yeah,
man, the
it's
football is
fantastic.
important.
I've
It's
I've
still
learned that.
it's still not as well, so it's still not as fun. Like because COVID, obviously, the
Hmm.
previous editions were like amazing. Like Euro is always amazing. World Cup is always like amazing in Europe. So that's
I
kind
can
of like
imagine. I know it's a big deal when my 6 year old comes home and he's like, I have to get tattoos. My friends all have football tattoos. I need football tattoos so I can be, yeah, cool with my friends. I'm like, okay, fine, we'll get you football tattoos. That's how you know it's a big thing. He wants temporary tattoos for football because it's just everywhere. So it's been fun, and it's apparently the Dutch team is doing all right based on the car horns and fireworks I've been hearing the past few nights. So.
yeah. Uh, Euro 2020. Yeah, it's like Euro 2020 happening in 2021. Uh,
Is that why? I was wondering about that. I thought maybe I just read it wrong, but yeah, no, okay.
no, no,
Is that
no.
because it couldn't happen last year because
Yeah,
of the pandemic? That
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. It was
Makes
moved
sense. Makes sense.
because pandemics. Speaking of that, like so we've met last time on the FableConf, right? And then
Yeah.
you both and like Rachel were like, oh, maybe we will start going to those conferences again, and then pandemics happened. So I blame you for
Yeah.
that.
Yep, we jinxed it. That's it. That's what it is exactly. We jinxed it. We were gonna start going to more conferences, and then Mother Nature was like, "Can't have that. Can't have that. Gonna issue a pandemic. Keep Paul and Rachel out of the conferences."
So that was actually like funny experience because not a lot of people in the community that were on FableConf like knew who you and Rachel were. So do you
It's
feel that you're like old guard and like new people are like new?
it's interesting. You wake up one day and you suddenly realize, or I suddenly realized, well, I've been doing this since 2007, so like it's a long time, and you suddenly realize that, well, okay, people come and people go, and who are all these new people? And like it's very Dean Martin. You walk into a conference, you're like, whoa, how do all these people get in my room? But no, it's FableConf was really interesting because like I think there was you and maybe one or two other people, and like yeah, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know any of these people. I'm like, where are all the regulars? Where are all the people I know? But it was cool. We got to meet lots of new people and have lots of fun. And I think it's a great sign that the community is growing. The language is finding new avenues for adoption. More people are interested in it. I think it's all good. So, but yeah, it is. There's very much a sense of being like the weird old guy.
Yeah, I mean, you've been around for a long time in like .NET space, right? Since the beginning.
Oh yeah, I mean, I my first exposure to .NET was beta testing some of the C# bits when it was still in beta. So I was at a Microsoft. I was working at a Microsoft Gold Partner ISP at the time, and we had gotten some of the beta bits to play with. And that was my first exposure to like. And I was like, "What? See what now?" I mean, because my background is not in tech. Like I fumbled my way backwards into tech from being a graphic designer. So like I was still figuring my way around VB script and VB and COM, and my coworker's like, no, you got to learn this. This is C sharp. This is new. This is you got to learn this. This is the new thing. I'm like, but dude, curly's and it was all right. I mean, I've done C sharp ever since, so I mean, clearly, clearly I learned something. But yeah, no, it's been a long time. It's weird to look at .NET also and see talk about things changing, and it's like .NET keeps getting better. Like it keeps getting more interesting. They keep finding ways to reinvent. They keep finding ways to make it newer and better, but with two problems. They keep needlessly mucking about with UI frameworks. When all you talk to any developer anywhere, all anyone ever wants is just bring back WinForms. Dude, just bring back WinForms. And that's never what they're going to do. And then the other thing I can't understand is WCF. WCF's like a cockroach. Like WCF and cockroaches and Twinkies are going to survive the next nuclear holocaust. You know what I mean? Like WCF will not die. It's I don't know any developer who actually enjoys working with it, and yet another
Well,
iteration of WCF coming to .NET Core
yeah,
or
I
.NET
mean,
6 or whatever.
it's not really. So is it coming? I don't think it's supported nowadays in the
No, it
.NET
is.
Core.
It is.
Oh,
There's a starting with .NET 5. There is a not all of WCF. They've dropped a lot of the Windows specific stuff and some of the more exotic client stuff that they were doing, but there's still a subset of WCF that at least on Windows still runs. It might be part of like the Windows compatibility layer that they had to put in because all of their big corporate customers were like, no,
yeah,
we're not coming off of Windows ever, so no.
yeah. I guess for
um,
a while, from what I've heard, is that yeah, and they, as someone points, like Ian Russell points out in chat, WinForms is also back in 5.0 in Windows compatibility pack. So that's
Oh, yeah, but they've kept it on Windows. They've said all of these things that we're not going to let die.
yeah.
We're only going to keep them on Windows. And you know what? That's all right, but most of what I do is not on Windows these days. So,
Yeah. So it's the WCF story is like funny. I've actually like joined the dot like started with .NET around 3.5 .NET 3.5
oh yeah,
time
yeah, yeah.
periods. So
Good
that was when
times.
when it was added, and I was like into it for a while. But that was like bad times. So actually, back then I was more excited about like Workflow Foundation. That was this like other thing that
Oh
was
yeah.
added in the same time period. So at the same time in 3.5 they've added WCF, WPF, and this like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Workflow Foundation, and was super excited about Workflow Foundation, uh,
Fun
which
fact:
was
Workflow
yeah
Foundation was originally called WWF.
yes
But they well, for the youngsters who are tuning in on Twitch who might not know this, so the WWE, which is this big pro wrestling thing in the states, used to be called the WWF. But then there's also the World Wildlife Foundation, and the World Wildlife Foundation took the WWF to court and sued them and won and got to own the abbreviation WWF. So WWF became WWE. World Wildlife Foundation says it was, and Microsoft was like, well, no, we can't call that WWF anymore. We'll just call it WF because it fits the pattern. We have WPF, WCF, and WF.
I, that's amazing story. I didn't know that. Like I was
That's
not
exactly why
into.
they were all set to release. There was some early press material where they even called it WWF, and then they had to rename it.
I'm fairly
So
sure that in one of the books that I had, it was called WWF.
yeah,
Yeah.
there was definitely some older material where it was, and then they had to change it. It's like, oh, but that's also didn't they have to change like Metro because there's something else was Metro. They always do these things where like they're gonna release something and they don't bother to check the code
I,
the
I
names
I
first.
mean, that the same happened like even nowadays with this like Mwai thingy,
Oh yeah, I
which the thread on the GitHub was yeah, that was disaster.
yeah I sometimes it's fun to watch the tire fire, get some popcorn. Sometimes I just got to turn it off and go away. I just got to be
But
like, nope,
so
done.
Yeah, so the most important, like the most funny thing about this thread is that kind of like how Microsoft fanboys were defending that way more than Microsoft themselves. This is like kind of like a reoccurring theme with like Microsoft and the dev division.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Well, I mean, hey, listen, if you can get a horde of people to fight your battles for you, I mean,
yeah. So
that's
that's
why we have aristocracy, right? I mean, that's the that's so you can get the horde to fight your battles for you. That's exactly why.
dude, you live in the country where you have king,
I
so
do. I have a king. It's weird living with a king. It's awesome. Apparently, he is very fun and sociable and casual and doesn't take his corona rules very seriously. He was out celebrating after the football match, not
yeah.
not keeping a meter and a half from anyone. So it's a good time. He seems like a nice guy though. He seems fun. He seems cool. They show a lot of times video of him like he'll be going somewhere and the royal sort of motorcade is just him on a bicycle followed by one security guard a few meters back on another bicycle and like that's it.
That's
It's the
cool.
most Dutch. It's the most Dutch thing ever. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, the king rolls up to important meetings on his bicycle. Love it. Love it. I have to
That-
admit, I have 5 keys on my keychain now. 4 of them are for bicycles. I don't own a car, but I do have 4 bicycles. So there you go.
That's
Dutch
lovely.
Dutch living
That's
at its
that's
finest.
yeah, that's Dutch or Belgium or like
Yeah,
Den Denmark.
this is the thing when I talk to my American friends. This is the thing, folks back in the States, they can't wrap their head around.
Yeah,
They just can't.
yeah. So 3.5 times, that was a while ago. So when you started with F sharp, that was also like
I
years
start.
ago.
Oh my God! I started with F sharp 2007. I found not the first version of F sharp that I ever worked with, but I found an old version on one of my old disk drives a while ago, version 1.9.7. It's the oldest one I could
Yeah.
find on my old hard drives, but I know I started earlier than that. Back when this is back when it was still an MSR product. It still had the license was still the MS reciprocal license,
Mhm.
and it would look the code base looked very different. Obviously, things weren't so cleaned up. None of the naming conventions had been normalized. They hadn't made any effort at productizing it. So yeah, because that was 2007. 2006 I had discovered functional programming and thought this seems cool because I had started to get bored and fed up with other things. I had done a lot of C sharp, I'd done a lot of VB, I'd done some Ruby and some Python. I'd done plenty of JavaScript. I was looking for something different. I thought functional programming looks interesting, and at the time nobody had good explanations for functional programming.
Yeah.
And all these, I mean, lots of communities have done a really good job in the intervening 16 or 14, 15 years. Uh, but back then, everyone knew Haskell academically as a functional programming language, knew Lisp as a functional programming language. Some people would say OCaml, but you'd go to their websites and the getting started materials were not there. The
Yeah.
tooling experience was not there. Like it was, I hadn't even heard of Erlang, and I stumbled into F sharp sort of by accident, just as I was about to just give the whole functional programming thing a miss. And again, the documentation wasn't great, but there was a plugin for Visual Studio which put it tooling wise light years ahead of trying to
Yeah.
get Emacs running because back then I was on Windows and Emacs on Windows has always been sort of a yeah. And better because it ran on .NET, what I could do is, I don't know if anyone still uses, Reflector. Redgate bought Reflector, but before Redgate bought it, it was put out for free independently by this guy named Lutz Reuter, who was just awesome. And I spent a lot of time in Reflector learning how the internals of, the .NET framework worked because it was all closed source back then, and I could decompile the F sharp code and I could figure out I could learn how it was working under the covers, which helped me wrap my head around all these different constructs. So it was quite a thing, quite a
Yeah.
thing. And
But
then yeah, yeah.
even like back then, I think that well, maybe not like really 2006, 2007, but really soon the like source code was also like available, right? Of the F sharp. It was
Oh no,
first distributed as a zip file or something like
oh
that.
no, no. F sharp source code was available then. It was absolutely F sharp source code's been available almost from day one. It was available back then, but what I mean is looking at the decompiled code. The code then did a good job of being decompiled and then recompiled back into C sharp. It helped me to understand the concepts because what there
Fair
wasn't was
enough.
a lot of documentation for F sharp. But then, sort of out of the blue, Robert Pickering kind of fixed that because in late 2007, early 2008, he released the first F sharp book. And I was like, great, I have a book, I have a tool, I have an IDE tool, like I'm set. Like I can do this now. It was pretty cool. because this is back when, at least for me, the internet existed, but it wasn't really an
Hmm.
information transfer thing for programming. Most of the programming knowledge I got back then came from, I'm gonna go hang out at Barnes and Noble for a couple of hours and page through some books and then maybe actually buy one of them. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of like book learning still, so it was
I
cool
know
to
the
have an F
feeling.
sharp book.
Uh, so what really happened next? Because so you're famous, kind of like in the community, I guess, for this
For marrying
.NET.
Rachel, yeah.
Yeah, for obviously for marrying Rachel, that's like really important. But also for like being advocate of using .NET as a whole with like different programming languages.
Yeah,
So
that was for the longest time. That was my pitch. I still think that's an underexplored vector for people. I think my personal opinion. I know why it's not feasible in a political and corporate sense and sort of a practical sense. But my dream version of .NET is a version of .NET where you have 10 small languages instead of two or three big languages. And the entire ecosystem and runtime and tooling and everything is geared around mixing and matching these smaller languages. And that's my dream. Like the closest I've seen to that is if you ever work with Racket, which is a scheme dialect, but they added a whole bunch of extra tooling for making languages. You basically you do domain specific languages to solve problems with Racket, and that's sort of the model. That's sort of the idea. I think that would be great. And this is sort of my, it's never going to happen, but
yeah,
this was my dream of like, okay, you'd have a C sharp file and an F sharp file and a VB file, and maybe there's a JavaScript file. And like each language would be smaller and simpler and a more focused set of features. And you'd use different languages for different tasks. Another example that is sort of in the same vein is, I don't think people still do this anymore, but I know once upon a time in Xcode you could mix Objective C and C and C++ and Swift all in the same file even. And I don't think people still do much of that, but approaches like that where you really let the languages sort of tailor themselves to specific activities or specific modes of thinking. So I think really interesting and an underexplored area in software development and in computing.
yeah. The funny thing, like just like Ian points out in chat, is that's how it like that was like initial pitch of .NET, right? So a lot of languages and single platform back in like 20 years ago. Uh,
Hmm. I mean, the
Unfortunately,
first
yeah.
version of .NET had four, five, six languages in the box. I think four, five languages in the box, and they pitched it as we're going to get every language. It turns out what they wanted was we're going to get every developer and funnel all of them to C sharp, except for the handful of cultists who we're going to funnel over to F sharp. Yay, cultists! There are dozens of us,
Does
dozens.
yep, totally. Well, one less nowadays, but the
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's very sad. I just found out this morning. I logged into Twitter and my entire feed was wishing Philip all the best, and I do wish him all the best. But it's sad. It's bittersweet. It's happy that your friend is going on to do new and different things and have a big adventure, and that's awesome for him. But oh man, he's gonna leave big shoes to fill. He's gonna leave a big hole in the community. Like I mean, just simply his ability to manage between the demands of the community and the demands of Microsoft and sort of being this excellent facilitator and distributor of information on top of his like knowledge and just the fact that he's a cool guy to hang out with and just talk to and
yeah,
chill with. Like I'm gonna miss him. Hopefully we'll get a chance as hopefully more in-person conferences resume. Hopefully I'll get a
yeah.
chance to go back to the States and run into him and whatnot because
That
he's
would be
good
great.
people.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, the Philip had is Philip in chat. Philip, are you in chat? I don't want to talk about you if you're in chat. Uh, uh, no, Philip is not in chat. Okay, that's fine. Philip had great ability to like mesh with the existing community, like from
Hmm.
day one when he like came to F Sharp Exchange, I think in London, he was like
Hmm.
okay, just cool guy to hang out with, and he was able to create this like build personal relationship with like a lot of uh, I don't want to say important people because like everyone in community is important, but with a lot of those super active people in the community that kind of like
Yep.
creates the direction in which community is moving. So he
Yep.
was able to create personal relationship with like all those people. That was I think super important in the context of changing how F# community has felt about Microsoft.
Yeah.
So when I've joined like 7 years ago or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
it felt that the only path of success for F# is to be outside of Microsoft.
Yes.
And now it feels that this like cooperation with Microsoft, maybe it's not easy, but it's there, and the like relationship with Microsoft is stable. And that change has been personally created by Philip, basically. And like,
Absolutely. He was central to that. And the thing that, you talk about being at something a long time and what does a thing look like over time. And I just remember that there was a period right before Philip where, basically the F sharp PM spot was basically a revolving door. I mean, I think they went through 3 or 4 or 5 PMs in a course of less than 5 years, maybe less. And that's to no one's fault. It's nobody's. It didn't work out. It's hard. It's a hard job. It's a difficult and demanding job, and finding someone who has just the right skill set and just the right temperament and having everything align that way is really tricky. And so I personally, I'm really going to miss Philip because he pulled all these different threads together in a way that, like you said, completely changed the dynamic of how this massive, top five tech giant and this teeny tiny community of passionate people relate to one another, and got it so that everyone's actually working together much better. Everyone's moving in the same direction, and it does feel much more equitable. And the relationship between the community and Microsoft at this point feels better than I've seen it in the 14 years I've been here.
yeah.
So and that's like you said, it's mostly down to Philip, and so kudos to him, man. And I will miss him. I will. And the other thing I worry about is if you look at like managing sort of like the flow of information, it's real easy to get lost in that and for people to get the wrong message. And Phil always did such a great job with comms, just a fantastic job of like not taking sides and just keeping everything at level and keeping everyone informed. And like it's gonna be awesome. Like it's gonna be. I don't envy who steps into his shoes because they're gonna have their work cut out for them. The bar's been set very, very high. So
Yeah,
Phil's just awesome.
at the same time, I'm kind of like hopefully optimistic. I think that Microsoft, after Philip, understand what's needed for the like position of F# PM way better than they've understood before Philip. So
Yeah, I think so. I think they've got a good sense of before they hadn't necessarily seen someone be super successful in that role, and now they
yeah,
have. So they have a template to sort of to gauge things against and to give them a better way forward in the future, which is awesome.
yeah,
And
definitely.
the other thing I think about, I just remembered now. You mentioned F Sharp Exchange, whereas the first one he was at, and I think I missed that one. I think I had some other commitment or something, but Rachel was at that one because I do remember her talking to me when we were having an after hours sort of like phone call or a Skype session or something, and she was like, "So I met the new F Sharp PM today." I was like, "Oh," and he was like. I just remember she was like, "Yeah, he seemed really cool, really enthusiastic, pretty knowledgeable, but oh my God, he's a baby."
Dude, he's the same age as me.
Yeah, but I mean, comparatively, he was, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
obviously.
like but no,
I
she was impressed by him. She was very very impressed by him, and that was my first sort of like fun the memory of that.
I mean, dude, that was like 6 years ago. We were
Yeah.
24 or something like both me and Philip. We
Oh
were
God,
like,
I
yeah.
I 24 was long enough ago for me that I don't remember 24.
Yeah, I'm now old. I'm now old
I'm
after.
kind of I'm gonna be upset if Scott Vlash and Kid Eason and a couple other people step out of the community ever, because at some point then I'm gonna be stuck being the oldest guy there. So that's
So
okay.
yeah, I remember like while back when I was kind of like one of the youngest people in the community, and now
Hmm.
I'm kind of like all those new people, the young folks, like they are all terrible. No, they're all great,
No,
obviously.
they are. And you need new people. You need people of all ages, all diversities, all walks of life. You need that mix. That's why, like, I forget who I was talking to. I was talking to somebody the day they were getting frustrated about there was some like increase in drama and increase in people with the, butting heads about something. And I was like, on the one hand, it sucks to have to moderate it and it sucks to have to sort of like deal with it because it's a little unpleasant, but that's a sign of growth. That's a sign the community is getting bigger, the community is healthy, that you've got people with competing interests,
Yep.
sort of creating some friction, and hopefully you manage the friction, and out of that dynamic tension, some good things come. And I think if you look at where things have been going with the language, I think that absolutely is the case for the
I
most
think
part.
I think that's kind of like really important point, and I think like a lot of people in the community underestimate this like the gain from the friction and then from competing ideas. Like especially like on Twitter when people are complaining about other people complaining, like they want everyone to be like one big happy family, and that's not always the case, and that's not really how you progress stuff. Well,
Yeah,
not necessarily how.
and I think you use the perfect word there, family. And like, I mean, I can't speak for other people, but like I know for me, the people I consider my family are every day is not a good day. Every day is not smooth sailing. Like
Yep.
when it matters, we're there for each other. We help each other. We have each other's back. But there's friction. There's fighting. I mean, a person who I think of as family who's also in the F sharp community though has sort of become very quiet in recent years is Rick Meinrich, right? And
Yep.
he's been around longer than I have, and him and I very very close, good friends. Used to work together. Was best man at a wedding. But no joke, I love him like a brother, but we fight like we're family, but like we will shout at each other, and like there's friction and we disagree on things, and like that's part of that whole process. That's part of that growth. So I think yeah, it can't be all sunshine and rainbows all the time.
I mean,
But you
how
you got to
many?
make something positive out of it though. You got to take the energy and the chaos and the friction and make something positive out of it. And I think the community has gotten pretty good at that.
Yep, definitely. There are still some people that kind of like, yeah, me included, that are a bit, hot-headed. Let's call it like that. But yeah, I think that we are getting better at stuff, which is positive.
No,
Uh,
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think a lot of. So I don't know really what's your experience in this area, but what do you think about Fable? Like, because that's the avenue of this growth over the last couple of
So
years.
I love Fable as a concept, and I think the folks who are involved with it have done a fantastic job. And I think it's actually really great tech, and I'm glad it's a part of the F Sharp ecosystem, and I'm glad we can say confidently and sort of very very almost boastfully, yes, F Sharp runs on .NET. It also runs anywhere you can put JavaScript because we have a world class F Sharp to JavaScript compiler. I refuse to use the word transpiler because that's not a real thing, but it's a compiler. And and that's fantastic. I personally don't do a lot with Fable because for me, the parts of the JavaScript ecosystem that I dislike or that I find distasteful or that I struggle with are not the parts that Fable addresses. Fable does a great job of addressing the language deficiencies of JavaScript in a brilliant way. My issue was always more with a new library every week and fighting Node and Webpack and honestly, why would I want to run a single threaded environment on my server when I can literally run any programming stack I want on my server? Like JavaScript in my browser, I get it. It's the browser. You don't have a choice. My server, like, I already know a bunch of other languages and they have different runtime profiles. And like, why can't I, use the Beam where it makes sense to use the Beam? Why can't I use .NET where it makes sense to use .NET? Why can't I do something with OCaml where it makes sense to use OCaml?
Let's stop that. We should, in any case, we should use Beam. That's kind of like.
You know what? Honestly, I don't spend enough time on the Beam, and I will say that till the day I die. I think as a piece of engineering, as a platform for running software, especially server-based software, I think the Beam is just outstanding.
Yep.
Just outstanding. There are areas where obviously .NET or Rust or other things do better, but just across the board, if you're doing websites, if you're doing web-based services, if you're doing network services, if you're doing distributed computing, you could do a lot worse than the Beam. The Beam is just a fantastic piece of engineering. A lot of shops I've worked at over the years wound up with some variation of microservices that 9 times out of 10, I would like, look, guys, what you actually really just want is an umbrella app on the Beam where you can hot swap some code. That's all you're really after when you look at your reasons for why you've set up this complex. I mean, not every place. Some shops have legitimate political or technical motivations for doing microservices and business alignment, yada yada yada. But a lot of places they really would have gotten further if they just had a small Beam cluster and had
Yeah.
some Erlang applications or some Elixir applications. And I'm always keeping an eye on new languages, and there's a handful of interesting languages that I keep an eye on. But then there's the ever present, and this has been going on for as long as not as long as .NET has been around, but as long as F# has been around, surely. Um, who will land a big typed language on the Beam? There's been multiple attempts. There's been, I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 ML language attempts over the years. Now the newer ones are Caramel and Gleam, which are not in the ML family, but are attempts at strong typing on the Beam. And I think if that ever happens, that's just gonna be
Yeah.
like being in Candyland. That's just gonna be amazing.
So my worry is that like basically every year there is new attempt and nothing works out of that. So I'm not really sure
It is
if there is
pretty
interest. Yeah.
it is pretty notable that the 3 languages that are thriving on the Beam are all sort of in the dynamically typed camp.
Yeah.
And then they are all thriving. They're all great languages. I mean, the job I'm at now currently, I had originally pitched them on doing a bunch of stuff with Elixir, um, but in the end, for a number of reasons, we wound up settling on doing a bunch of stuff in a mix of F# and Rust and Python. But absolutely, I think there's some cool things to be had. And then, of course, it should be said there are areas where it's not appropriate. If you're trying to ship a tiny executable to a bunch of different devices, the Beam is not for you. That's not where you want to go. You want to look at Rust for that, right, or OCaml, right? But for a lot of these web-based things, like I think the
Yeah.
Beam is overlooked by people. Although I get a
Also,
little. But go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
just so I'm mostly like my familiarity with Beam is around Elixir. I
Hmm.
like Erlang has yeah, I'm not a fan of like Erlang syntax. I know that that's the most important thing in the programming language. I'm just not a fan.
No,
Uh,
hey, syntax is important. I'm a believer in syntax being important. You got to have a syntax that can help you express your ideas. So,
so in Elixir, the Phoenix is just the most like impressive web framework that I've ever used. Like
hmm
hands-on, that's the best web framework that I've seen. Uh,
hmm
Obviously, I've like used a lot of inspiration from that while building my own web framework for F sharp. But then, yeah, Phoenix is just awesome. So the combination of Beam being awesome and like Phoenix being so awesome is like killer for me for like building web applications. If I were kind of like go back to like consulting around like building web applications, which doesn't sound likely. Uh, in short term, at least, I would kind of try to probably pitch, yeah, Beam with Phoenix Elixir even more than I used to.
Agreed. It's definitely there's a lot more spaces where people could be using it to very good ends, I think. But absolutely. But I mean, getting back to the language thing, I just one of the thoughts I had that I wanted to make before that I forgot about. One of the things I wish everyone could do, and it's not practical, it's not feasible, but I still do it sometimes when I can, is when especially if you're a library author, whatever language you're working in, whatever your domain is, if you're developing a library or a framework, if at all possible, take a minute, take some time, carve out 20% of your week, just one Friday afternoon or whatever. Or I guess that's 10%. One Friday afternoon, 10% of your time, whatever. Um, and take what you think is your normal model, your core, whatever, and rewrite it in a completely different language, at least partially, just because you will be surprised at how many implicit assumptions you didn't realize you were making that get totally checked. And in environments where there's only a single language like Haskell or OCaml or Rust, it's somewhat less fruitful to write it in a different language. It's still fruitful, but somewhat less fruitful. But in environments like the JVM or .NET or the Beam, where there are multiple substantially different languages, doing that rewrite really helps you find edge cases, helps you find, like I said, implicit assumptions, things you weren't thinking about, really helps you consider the full picture, helps you understand if you want to reach a broader audience, what you would have to do. If you want to do that, some people don't want to do that, and that's fine too. And it's just this educational experience of getting outside your box a bit. And I think even though .NET didn't necessarily become the platform I wanted it to be with all these little languages working together, it still offers this great sort of cognitive check, at least for library and framework designers. And this is not just me riffing about this. You see a lot of this playing out on Twitter if you look at any of David Fowler's tweets, where he's like, I suddenly decided to look at F sharp for no reason. And oh my God, here's all these ideas of things we could do differently in ASP.NET Core. Like, so there's like I'm not the only one who has had this cognitive sort of like aha effect from trying to take what is familiar and put it in a slightly alien context. So,
Yeah, that's kind of like probably the advice even more useful for C# developers than for F# developers, because like
sure.
many, if not the most, F# developers have exposure to the C#. That's kind of like what traditionally we come from
Or
as
at
a
least another
community.
language. I mean, very few people are exclusively F sharp.
Yeah,
Everybody seems to come to F sharp from something else, if it's C sharp or it's Python or it's JavaScript or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's a good point.
because
Although there is one thing I think as F sharp continues to grow, you mentioned Fable. It's a thing that I was thinking about. Um, Sorry to jump around. My thoughts get a little nonlinear sometimes.
that's fine.
I think it's good that we grow and we bring in people from other communities. And I think as part of that, and I don't know what the right term is. I guess folks like Don and Philip, folks who are trying to guide the growth of things, also need to take a look at sort of, and I guess the community as a whole can do this ourselves. What sort of idioms do we want? Because one of the things that's very interesting to me is I did a couple of projects where I worked with people who were coming to F sharp via Fable from a JS background and a PHP background, and the idioms they considered standard or the sort of normal patterns they looked for were significantly different from the things we're used to in .NET land. And it's not to say that one is good and one is bad, but it is to say that things start to not look consistent. Things start to look like
Mhm.
multiple different, you know, things look a bit fractured, and that's a thing the community as a whole should try to find a direction on, I think. Whatever that
I,
direction happens to be. I won't
I've
I won't be so bold as to say what I think the right direction is, but I think
yeah.
there's a thing to be said for like, if the community all collectively decides this is the convention for this is the idiom for this, then let's do that. And if they decide, no, 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 we want this to be the idiom, then let's do that. But then of course the hard part is when until you get enough critical mass in one direction, how do you manage it and blah blah blah. And so it's a thing I wrestle with as somebody who's interested in these sort of patterns and languages and stuff.
I guess like all languages like struggle with that, especially all languages that are like multi-paradigm, specifically like
Yes.
Scala. Scala
Oh
is a
my
great
God.
example of that, right?
Yes,
Because
yes, yes.
it can push like both OO to extreme and functional programming to extreme. It's like you
Yeah.
won't find two similar Scala code bases in the wild. Uh, so yeah, I think like with F# we do a bit better job at that because we are kind of like constrained. So I think Don has.
You'd be surprised. You'd be
Yeah,
surprised.
I mean, obviously you can try to do like purely like functional like Haskell-ish style code. You can do also like more traditional OO kind of programming with C#, but
Well, I mean, even just when I was at Jet, like Jet was an interesting. I mean, okay, we could tell stories about Jet. That's a whole.
probably we
Woo!
shouldn't do that on the stream though, man.
Yeah, well, some of them we could tell. I mean, most of them probably aren't appropriate. But Jet's not in business anymore. I don't think Walmart will come after me for saying certain things. I hope. NDAs only last for so long, right? I mean, but even there were the mode there was a bunch of teams, like lots of teams working very independently and very quickly. And what you wound up with was a lot of different ways of doing the same thing, and it really became there was a legit onboarding period if you moved from one team to another because even though everyone was using F sharp, everyone was using F sharp very differently. And after a while, they actually did try to sort of corral that and standardize things. But I mean, they wound up there organically. And so there was a lot of churn to get there and that's a thing that, I mean, in the end, it didn't matter. I mean, Jet still got sold, whatever. But like, I think that's a thing if the community could learn from that,
Oh, but
the other,
Jet is like super. special case. Like, I don't think there's any other F sharp company that ever grown so quickly and become so big so quickly.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna plug it here because I can. I think that's true, but I think that's because Jet did something that they had an attitude about something that you don't see in other companies that I think is the smart attitude. I think they were like, and this doesn't have to be F sharp necessarily, but whatever technology you're sort of settling on, like they went right out and day one said, "We will train you in this. You don't have to know this." So many companies don't want to spend the time on training. I mean, Jet had Rachel do this massive training program that she ran that they were still using long after she left, that their Walmart might still be using for their handful of properties or still in F sharp. I don't know. But like this massive training regimen that was key to, like, it didn't matter. They were hiring people and looking at other things than just, do you already know this technology? They were looking at their backgrounds, they were looking at their aptitudes, so on and so forth, and they were just like, we'll train you. And I think that's an approach that for any technology, like when managers are like, oh, but where will we find the developers, where will we hire people, and be like, so what you're telling me is you don't want to train people, you have
Yeah.
no interest in training people up, because I mean that's how they grew from so small to so many, is because they put the investment, a huge investment, in training.
At the same time, they had really good base, right? The New York community was.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they kind of cannibalized it a little bit, but they did pick a good location to start from. I think it would have been a little bit harder for them if they originally set up shop in sort of the middle of nowhere. Uh, and the U.S. is a big place. There's a lot of tiny towns in Middle America that they could have set up in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting, this notion of how badly do you want something? Do you have a
Yeah.
plan for something?
Yeah, and definitely the like training and like just hiring people based on some kind of like other features they have rather than just knowledge of particular programming language. I can like I've got hired at current job just like that. Like no one. I had like multiple technical interviews, and no of those were about like my skill in programming language that I happen to use at current project.
Right. I mean, they hired you because they wanted, they're looking at how you solve problems. You're a creative thinker, how you come at it, and they make the assumption that reasonably intelligent people can transition between tech reasonably easily.
Yep.
Speaking of, the new gig is good. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot on camera or anything, but you're
It's amazing.
you're gonna
I
wow us with cool and interesting things now that you're in the office of the CTO.
Yeah, I think we are going. Yeah, we are definitely going to wow everyone. I cannot share any details,
Oh no, I'm
unfortunately.
sure, I'm sure, I'm sure. I get that, I get
Those
that.
projects are kind of experimental, or everything is it's crazy ideas. We do some crazy ideas. There will be some cool announcements coming. That's all I can say.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
And
I'm
man,
absolutely looking forward to
I'm
it.
kind of like I don't remember the last time I was so excited about like working as I'm
That's awesome,
currently.
dude. That's so awesome. I'm so glad for you at that. I love when people say that, and especially to hear my friends say that. That's fantastic. That's just amazing.
And
That is amazing.
yeah, it's kind of like that's like that job has been uh, well the path to be where I am right now was kind of like bumpy over the last couple of years. So I'm kind of like really happy that I've ended up here. So don't get me wrong, like I loved consulting with F Sharp. But doing short contracting gigs and like consulting, this is like a bit different than actually committing to something on full time and actually like working on project you fully believe into rather than just someone is paying you good money to fix their
Yeah,
technical problems.
it is a very different environment. It is, but both can be rewarding in their own ways, but it's a very different environment,
Yeah,
and it's good to spend over the course of one's whole career. It's good to spend some time in each because it gives you perspective, and absolutely. I'm glad you're excited about it though. That's awesome.
we are going whoa, everyone, dude. I'm
I
telling you
can't
that
wait.
now.
I mean, I absolutely can't wait. And
Unfortunately, it's nothing directly related to F sharp. I will try to smuggle some F sharp in the future to our like teams. Hopefully, so there's like a lot of people with in the team. There's like a lot of people with like compiler backgrounds or actually math backgrounds from like the
hmm
category theory, but from like mathematical approach. Like this is like super diverse team doing from me, like guy without really, formal education. Like I haven't finished university, right?
Hey,
I
join the
don't.
club. You join the club, man.
Happy Chris on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I am happy on Twitter recently, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, pretty soon they're going to stop, referring to what was the vocal,
Annoyingly vocal.
annoyingly vocal minority, right?
Yeah, that's also like good old times.
Uh,
But that's again like circling back to Philip. That's something that has been gone, at least to a degree. Like
oh yeah,
I don't think right now in 2021 F-Sharp community has this opinion of being so annoyingly vocal as it was back in 2015 when I've
I,
joined.
I think it's definitely the reputation has definitely gotten better. There's a much bigger sense. There's a lot less. You hear a lot less about people complaining about, you know, punching up or punching down. I still do a little bit of punching up because I think it's fun. But yeah, you do. There's the community overall has a reputation now. The reputation I think has improved. I think people find it's less about vocal minority making trouble and ba 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 ba, and it's more look, there's a solid group of people doing a solid thing. They have legitimate goals. They have legitimate concerns, and so I do think. And again, bring it back to Philip. Philip is hugely instrumental in making that happen. So you know, we owe him a lot. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that will be, the change is always interesting. Like, so of course I'm a bit like worried about what will come next because this is the change. Like, it's natural to be worried about the change, but at the same time, the change is exciting. So,
Yeah, and I got to admit, from what little I know of where Philip is headed, I mean, he's going to one of the places where if I were looking for work in the U.S.,
oh
that's a
yeah,
company I'd be looking to interview with.
yep.
Absolutely. So
It's
I think he's
definitely
going to have a great time there,
it's
from
definitely
what little I
the
know.
great company. Yeah, it's definitely an awesome place to be in. So from like Philip's point of view, like I'm excited for my friend that he's
Absolutely.
excited about new exciting stuff. From the community point of view, the change is interesting. We'll see.
Well, and Philip, for his part, has said he wants to still be involved in the open source community and in F sharp as much as he can. And so, who knows? Maybe being in this different position will free him up to do other things in the F sharp open source community, and that'd be awesome too, right? Because I mean, we could always use more help.
Yeah,
Maybe
definitely.
he can help me figure out why none of my tests run.
Yeah, the tests, man. So in FS autocomplete codebase, we have like 200 tests, and they like 100 of those randomly fails on CI, depending on the I don't know, like coin flip or something like
Oh yeah,
that.
I noticed that it's like GitHub Actions has failed these 7 tests. Well, I'm just gonna rerun that. Oh, look, they passed.
Yeah,
Uh, you know what though? It's all right. It's a fantastic library. It's enabled fantastic things in the community, and we keep pushing.
yeah, we definitely do. So the change kind of so because you've been around so long. How do you feel in general about direction that F Sharp has like went through in all those years? Are you
I
positive about the
think,
change that has happened?
yeah, I think if you look at F sharp, where the community and the language and the technology is now, as compared to 14 years ago, 15 years ago, it's night and day. It's totally different and it's 100% better. Absolutely. Um, I think, we've had, good periods and bad periods, and there's certainly still plenty of work to be done. But I think overall the trend is positive. I see just, anecdotally based off of keeping an eye on social channels and job postings and books and stuff like that. I've seen steady growth. I've seen continuous growth. Um, I should mention thing we forgot to mention before. For the past several years I've been the treasurer for the F Sharp Foundation. Um, We haven't seen massive explosions in membership in paying membership in the foundation, but we've seen, massive explosions in general membership, and we have seen steady, small but steady increase in paying membership. So like in that sense, the community is healthy, the community is vibrant, the community is growing. The tech, I mean, I think it's easy enough for people to look at the tech and see we're on all these platforms, we hit all these performance benchmarks, we're plugged into all these spaces, we have the whole .NET ecosystem in our back pocket, we can go anywhere JavaScript goes, and there's continually this notion of evolving things. Have you played with the new .NET Interactive stuff where they just put the REPL into as a .NET tool now, and that's actually been pretty wild. Doesn't run at all on my Windows machine at work, but
Who
my
cares
window
about that, man?
my Windows machine at work is a very special Citrix virtual machine that I remote into that has a very weird and special configuration, and it's my job is fascinating. The bank trusts me enough to do whatever I want to do on their production servers, but I can't install Windows Terminal on my desktop. So it's like there's this weird relationship with like
That
where the
makes
trust boundaries are is very
yeah.
very unusual. But I've been playing with the .NET Interactive stuff on my Linux setup at home, and it's tons of fun. It's nice. It's building up that interactive experience, which is fun because going full circle, going back to 2007, one of the things that was really fresh and exciting about F sharp or OCaml or any of these other languages I was looking at back when I was still coming from this other background, many years ago, was this notion of a REPL, this notion of REPL driven development, this being able to just I don't have to add a test project and add a bunch of scaffolding. I can just open a window and type stuff and
Yeah.
boom, my code is running. Like that was cool. In that regard, I think the way the JavaScript community has gone with turning the browser into a more Smalltalk like environment that is live interpretable or live interactable is really a good thing for development. I wish more things went that way. I think that's another great thing about the Beam. We were talking about the Beam
Yeah.
before. One of the most eye-opening experiences for me was when a good friend of mine who I used to work with at Jet, uh, uh, Kara Mitchell, was showing me like, look, this is the Beam, and this is me remoting into a live session of this massive distributed system and interacting with it and profiling it and debugging it live. And like I didn't have to attach a special debugger, I didn't have to bring in special tooling, I didn't have to, it's literally just I connect, I open the terminal, I'm there, and I can do everything. I can hot reload code, I can interact with the system in a real way, I can send messages. It was very very eye-opening to me. So
Yeah, to be fair, that's a bit more complex in like in the compiled style like .NET has.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's your engine has to be designed for it, and
Yeah,
the Beam was designed for that sort of model for day one. But I think more things like that in general in software development where it can be accommodated are good things. Absolutely.
absolutely. So I guess like one quick last question. So how do
hmm
you feel about .NET Core in general? Because that's been like probably the biggest change over those like 20 years, right?
I think the idea of .NET running on not Windows is mind blowing. I mean, I'm somebody who I got my start in programming on the old Apple PowerPC, the 9500 series, and then went into Windows as I became more and more of a developer because that's who was hiring at the time. And this notion that Microsoft would make a thing that runs as well or better on Linux than it does on Windows is just wow. It's just night and day. And I mean, again, like at work, I remote onto this Citrix Windows machine to do my development, but then everything we deploy, except for one service, goes to a cluster of Linux images, in a Kubernetes cluster. We have this one authentication service that because it interacts with AD, it was just easier to deploy it on
Yeah.
Windows. But that's just corporate Active Directory. They haven't gone on to ADFS yet, and blah 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 blah. But I mean, it's a small little service. But like, it's so wild that and like even when before this job, when .NET Core first came out, I was playing around. The fact that I wrote a quick and dirty little note-taking app on my Linux machine, and then I copied it over to my Windows VM. Like took the executable, copied it over to the Windows VM, and it just ran. Like that's amazing. Like to get that out of .NET, like I never would have thought if you'd asked me 10 years ago if .NET was going to be able to do that 5 years ago. Well, 5 years ago, maybe I would have said there are signs, but 10 years ago, no, absolutely not. Like
Yeah.
that's just, it's wild. And I do think that's the biggest thing. And Microsoft really trying to lean into open source a bit more, I think, bit of a double-edged sword there, a bit of a mixed bag, but overall positive, overall a good thing, and very much, a far cry from, 10, 15, 20 years ago when literally people would refer to open source, people within Microsoft would refer to open source as a euphemism for not Microsoft. So like very, very different to see that political change over the years, and
Yeah.
a good thing, I think. So
Oh yeah, definitely.
I
That's
think I
been.
think the next challenge though is companies like Microsoft and lots of companies have to find a way to, and this is the thing you, me, and Philip have talked about a bunch over beers and what happy to do again. These companies have to find a way to pay back into open source better than they have. They have to find a way to
Yeah.
monetize this better for the contributors, for the creators, for the authors, because they get a lot out of it. They've got to put something back into it, and the best thing they can put back in is money.
Yep,
and
definitely.
and how that looks can be complicated, and what the fine points are, and is accounting and procurement and all that bullshit, but like that, at the end of the day, I think that's the next thing that's going to keep this growing and sustainable, and I think the right people are starting to understand that.
Yep, that's definitely like. I mean, open source sustainability discussion is totally different topic.
Oh yeah,
We don't have we don't
don't have
have
time
to.
for that. I
Yeah.
don't have it. We know it though. At least in Europe, they're starting to ease some of their coronavirus restrictions. We'll have to get some people together,
Yep.
sit out on a terrace somewhere, have a couple of drinks, and that's a proper
Yep.
that's a lengthy conversation.
Definitely. All right. Anything else? Like any topic that we haven't covered that you want to
Um,
mention?
No, I think the only other thing I'll say is I think F Sharp's in a great space. I've been having fun with it. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, this has been totally awesome. I guess the last thing I'll say is I sat down the other day and, you mentioned the conferences. F Sharp Exchange was like, "Are you doing cool things in F Sharp?" And I sat down to think about it. I was like, "I'm not doing cool things in F Sharp." And then I thought, that's actually really cool. Like, I am doing god awful boring line of business data processing stuff at a bank. And you know what? I'm doing it in F sharp, and that's cool. F sharp is no longer this niche, fringe, you can only do it for math and science thing.
Yep.
Like, I'm doing boring line of business stuff. I've put out 8 different F sharp services this year that are all just different, boring, essential business tasks. And like, it's boring work, but it's cool that it's boring work because there was a time where F sharp was this weird fringe thing. And like, would you even be allowed to put it in production? And now it's just, yeah, whatever. It's
Yep.
just, yeah.
We've all fought really hard to make that happen, I guess.
Yeah.
Like
And
so,
it's,
yeah.
it's
Everyone
the,
in the
it's,
community, Microsoft. So that's kind of like our.
everyone should give themselves a pat on the back. I can do really boring things with F sharp now, and that is awesome.
Awesome. So thanks for joining me, Paul. That was like
Thanks
pleasure.
for having me. This has been fantastic. This has been so great to catch up and fun to do this, and hopefully we can do more of these sorts of things and run into each other in actual person and
Oh
whatnot.
yeah,
But
that would be great. We definitely, yeah, the COVID needs to be gone, and then we need to do something cool together. All right, thanks for being here, everyone. It was great to have this conversation again. I don't have the guest for next week yet. Hopefully, I will have some. So follow me on Twitter to get updates. Follow me here on Twitch to get the notifications when I go live. The next week is a bit busy. I'll be a bit busy with work stuff. I'm not really sure if I'll find any time for live streaming or anything like that. I'll see. But yeah, I'll post the news on social. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for Paul for being here, and good night everyone. See you all.
yeah, cheers. Thanks. Talk to y'all later.